This hour on I-24 News, America is open for business. President Trump played the role of salesman-in-chief at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Turkey's President Erdogan has threatened to expand the fight against Kurdish rebels in the north of the country, rebels backed by the United States.
And in the wake of the sexual abuse case against former gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, the U.S. Olympic Committee is demanding the resignation of all members of the USA Gymnastics Board of Directors.
From the I-24 News Studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Schuster and Shayna Estulin.
And we've got Tal Heinrich in for Shayna. Great to have you here as always.
Great to be here.
President Trump went back to his roots on this day, playing a businessman on the world stage at the Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
The president invited global and financial leaders to invest in America while reassuring them that his America First agenda is not a rejection of international cooperation.
The world is witnessing the resurgence of a strong and prosperous America. I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again.
After leaving the podium, the president sat for questions from the chairman of the World Economic Forum.
Mr. Trump using the opportunity to highlight some of his own accomplishments.
We had a great first year, so successful in so many different ways. And there's a tremendous spirit when you look at all of the different charts and polls, and you see, as an example, African-American unemployment at the historic low. It's never had a period of time like this. Same with Hispanic. Women at a 17-year low. It's very heartwarming to see, but there's a tremendous spirit in the United States. I would say it's a spirit like I have never witnessed before. I've been here for a while. I have never witnessed the spirit that our country has right now.
Terry Moran has more details on the president's big day in Davos.
America is roaring back. That's the message President Trump delivered to the world leaders gathered here among the snowy peaks of Davos, Switzerland. At this annual conference of the world's movers and shakers, President Trump wanted to champion his America First policies and take some credit. His argument, his policies have delivered economic growth that a lot of people here have gotten a lot of money from. He also emphasized, however, that as he put it, America First doesn't mean America alone. He wants trade agreements, fair trade agreements, he says. He also wants investment in America, and he wants help. He asked for leaders here to help him and others put maximum pressure on North Korea in order to avert a war. As a private businessman, President Trump was never invited here. The billionaire snubbed him, but he was welcomed warmly here, more or less. One exception when he mentioned fake news. He got a bit of a boo in that hall. All in all, he came to look presidential, do a bit of a victory lap. That's what happened. He heads back to Washington today.
And that was Terry Moran reporting. Let's bring in Dr. Lindsay Piegza, chief economist at Stifel Fixed Income. Lindsay, regardless of whether this is the best economic times ever in the United States, as the president suggested, or maybe it's just behind the Clinton administration or Obama administration in terms of job growth, how important is it, though, for the president to be so enthusiastic about the U.S. economy?
Oh, absolutely. It's very important because this is the leader. This is going to be the #1 person that the American people are looking for to really set the tone for confidence. And he's been doing that and more so. So it's really important that he maintains that very positive attitude. He's focused on the accomplishments that we've seen from the administration. He's focusing on the better aspects of the data that we've seen for the U.S. economy. And that has helped, again, boost expectations, drive confidence that will continue to boost spending and boost investment, not only as we see the end of 2017 numbers, but into the new year for 2018.
And speaking about the data that Trump included in his speech about the economic growth here in the country, he talked about the creation of new jobs, the stock market adding new wealth. To what extent do you think that the president really deserves the credit for all these data and information he presented there?
Well, remember, the economy is very fluid, so it's very difficult to cut off where we start to see improvement, where we saw some of the more malaise start to taper off, and assign that to one presidency or the other. A lot of policy implications carry forward and so forth. So I do think that the Trump administration can take credit for a good part of the rally that we've seen in the equity market, as we saw the markets react very favorably in the aftermath of his election and have carried that positive momentum forward. We also know that there were a lot of pro-growth agenda items that came through within his first year that continued to boost the equity market, continued to boost confidence, and frankly continued to boost spending and business investment as well. So I think there is a good portion of the better than expected data that we've seen over the past 12 months that we can assign to the Trump administration.
And yet when working class Americans look at what the president is saying or look at that collection of really wealthy people that gathered in Davos, they say, well, wait a second, working class wages have largely remained stagnant, or the growth or the gap is getting bigger between wealthy and working class. Why should the working class feel optimistic?
Well, I think that points out the idea that we still have work to be done. When we talk about the U.S. economy trending on relatively more stable ground, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about a robust economy yet. And as you hit on the head, the labor market has taken steps in the right direction. We are seeing positive job growth on a month-to-month basis, but where are the wage gains? We're still talking about very stagnant growth at about 2.5%. And if we really were at this robust point of the recovery phase, we would easily be talking about 3.5% wage growth. So yes, we've taken steps in the right direction. It's only been a year for the Trump administration. They have 3 more now to really hammer home a lot of these pro-business agenda items that should trickle down to the middle class and make the middle class feel more confident, not only about their current financial footing, but about their future financial footing as well.
All right, Dr. Lindsay Piegza. Dr. Piegza, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
And meanwhile, here in the U.S., the president is on the defensive once again over the Russia investigation.
That's right. Mr. Trump pushed back on reports that he wanted to fire special counsel Robert Mueller last June, calling it fake news. Correspondent Arlette Saenz has the latest.
President Trump waved goodbye to Switzerland and waved off a report he tried to fire special counsel Robert Mueller.
Fake news, folks. Fake news.
What's your message?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
The New York Times reports the president ordered White House counsel Don McGahn to fire Mueller just 1 month after he was appointed special counsel in the Russia investigation. The Times reports Mr. Trump told associates he thought Mueller had conflicts of interest. According to the Times, the president ultimately backed down when McGahn threatened to resign. McGahn reportedly argued such a move would have a catastrophic effect on Mr. Trump's presidency.
Certainly, there's an argument to be made that you add this piece to the other pieces in the puzzle, and this is one more potential problem for the president.
The president's White House attorney on the Russia probe, Ty Cobb, responded to the report, saying, "We decline to comment out of respect for the office of the special counsel and its process." The president has publicly insisted ousting Mueller isn't on the table.
Mr. President, have you thought about or considered leading to dismissal of the special counsel? Is there anything that Bob Mueller could do that you would send you in that direction?
I haven't given it any thought.
But he's also repeatedly expressed doubt about the probe.
Do you think Robert Mueller will be fair to you in this larger investigation?
We're going to find out. There's no collusion. Now they're saying, oh, well, did he fight back? Did he fight back? Oh, it's obstruction. So here's the thing. I hope so.
And that was Arlette Saenz reporting. Let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv, to discuss it further. Let's think about, Dan, what the president said before he left Davos, Switzerland, that this report is fake news. Do you take that to be an absolute denial?
Tal, I don't, as a matter of fact. I feel like I'm your translator. I speak fluent Trumpish. Let's start with this. The president's lawyers and the White House staff refuse on the record to confirm or deny the story, and the president tried to minimize it by calling it fake news, not specifically denying that last June he told his White House legal counsel, Don McGahn, to start taking the steps through the Justice Department to fire the special prosecutor. Now, the story, of course, says that McGahn refused to do that that. Many Republicans say it would have been horrible to do that. There would have been such blowback from members of Congress in both parties. Now, the president, of course, has been on the record in recent weeks and months saying he doesn't plan on firing Mueller now. That's a way of saying fake news? Something about last June? It's kind of out of date, perhaps, David and Tal.
And Dan, because it's out of date, does it really make any difference? It certainly doesn't make any difference legally, but even politically, it does feel like it's something of a short-term hit, I suppose, for the people who weren't predisposed to like Donald Trump to begin with.
Well, maybe so, and it's a fascinating story, of course. We want to know everything that's been going on during the 53 weeks that Donald Trump has been in the White House. But this week, you know, Trump did say he looks forward to answering questions from the special prosecutor, even under oath. Of course, Trump's lawyers very quickly told reporters, wait, the president, you know, said that hurriedly, as one lawyer put it, and no arrangement's been made yet. Now, keep in mind that last June, when all of this supposedly happened, Mueller had been the prosecutor, the independent counsel, for just 1 month after James Comey was fired by Trump as FBI director. Now, the reason that Comey was fired, you know, Trump officially had some reasons about disorganization in the FBI, but Trump also told an interviewer, and he told Russia's foreign minister, it had something to do with the Russia investigation. So, according to this New York Times report, when Trump decided, maybe I'll fire the special prosecutor, he had reasons that had nothing to do with Russia. Things like conflicts of interest, like Mueller had a billing dispute with a Trump country club. All sounds kind of flimsy, but it is interesting. David and Tal.
And to another fascinating story, Dan, what's the new report about Hillary Clinton apparently sexual abuse by a man who worked for her campaign?
Another New York Times report, this one against the Democrat, Hillary Clinton. Makes her look bad. During her 2008 campaign for the Democratic nomination, she let a man named Burns Strider keep his job as her director of outreach to faith-based organizations, even when he was accused of unwanted sexual approaches to a younger woman in his office. Hillary Clinton insisted on letting him keep his job. The woman was moved away. Apparently, he suffered some financial penalty of some unpaid days. And then in 2016, he worked for the campaign again. He was fired for sexual misconduct. The Clinton team issued a statement that it did have procedures for handling misconduct allegations. The procedures were followed. But it doesn't look good for Hillary Clinton. Tal and David?
Indeed. Our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. Dan, thank you.
The world is reacting to President Trump's remarks in Davos, Switzerland, and still to come here on Crossroads, Mr. Trump's comments about the Middle East have again deeply angered Palestinians.
And there's a growing conservative and progressive backlash to the Trump administration's new immigration proposal. We'll get into that when Crossroads on I-24 News continues.
President Trump's trip to Switzerland has sparked more anger again among Palestinians.
That's right. During a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Mr. Trump threatened to cut off aid to the Palestinians. Our I-24 News correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump has renewed his threat to cut off financial aid to Palestinians if they don't agree to resume peace talks with Israel. With Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sitting right beside him, the president told the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that the Palestinians disrespected the U.S. when they refused to meet Vice President Mike Pence last week when he visited the region. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas traveled to Brussels for a meeting with the European Union foreign ministers instead.
When they disrespected us a week ago by not allowing our great vice president to see them, and we give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support, tremendous numbers that nobody understands. That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them.
The Palestinians are boycotting U.S. officials since late last year, when Trump announced his controversial decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a decision that drew praise from Netanyahu.
This is a historic decision that will be forever etched in the hearts of our people for generations to come. People say that this pushes peace backward. I say it pushes peace forward, because it recognizes history, it recognizes the present reality, and peace can only be built on the basis of truth.
But Palestinians are fighting back. President Abbas said through his spokesman, if Jerusalem is off the table, then America is off the table as well. Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Uraiqat rejected Trump's assertion that they disrespected Vice President Pence, saying that the Palestinians were misled by the president.
We met with President Trump 4 times. We were promised by President Trump he will not impose or dictate a solution, that he would have a fair agreement, and he would leave the issues, Jerusalem border settlements, refugees, to be negotiated and agreed by the parties. And then all of a sudden, he started dictating on us for internal political reasons of his. You're not going to make peace this way. You're not going to save lives of Israelis and Palestinians this way.
President Trump promised to reach a historic deal between Israelis and Palestinians.
My message is peace and prosperity. That's what we have.
He is talking about peace and prosperity in Davos. The way things are going now, this may just be all talk. Mohammed Al-Qasim, I-24 News.
To discuss, let's bring in our Tel Aviv correspondent, Guy Azriel. Guy, what are you hearing about President Trump's speech in Davos? Any interesting reactions in Israel or from the Palestinians?
Yes, Tal. Well, the main reactions came not from Trump's main speech in Davos, but rather from that side meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he once again threatened to cut off financial aid and also gave that somewhat vague remark about Jerusalem being off the negotiating table. A lot of angry reactions from the Palestinians, not just to those comments, but also to the whole landslide in relations with the U.S. over the past several weeks. As we just heard, Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat says the Palestinians will not negotiate if Jerusalem is taken off the table, and also claiming that such a move only rewards what he called Israeli aggression towards the Palestinians. On the other hand, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was all smiles after this meeting, stating that he and President Trump were on the same page. But Netanyahu was most satisfied from Trump, not on the Palestinian issue, but rather on Trump's hard stance on Iran nuclear deal, saying that he has Israel's backing if the U.S. wishes to pull out of the deal. So as we've gotten used to in recent months, Palestinian leaders fuming at Trump, while Netanyahu is sitting very comfortably.
Guy, there was a remarkable speech from Mr. Trump's predecessor in the White House, President Trump, this week, President Obama this week in New York. He spoke at a synagogue and he said that nobody supported the Israeli military like I did. Does President Obama's claim stack up?
Right, David. In one of very few public appearances since the end of his term, Obama gave this talk at a New York temple on Wednesday, telling audience that he's the biggest backer of Israeli military. Obama was quoted as saying that he gave more military aid to Israel than any other administration. And David, the numbers definitely back his claims. Obama signed an enhanced military aid package to Israel at the end of 2016, a $38 billion deal with Israel over a 10-year period, compared to just $30 billion package signed under President Bush. But having said that, many Israelis believe that what they didn't get from Obama was diplomatic support, both with regards to the Iran nuclear deal and to the negotiations with the Palestinians.
Guy Azriel reporting from our headquarters in the Middle East. Guy, thank you.
And still in the Middle East, at least 2 people have died in the latest Saudi-led airstrike on Yemen. The strike brings the number of victims to more than 30 people killed and several wounded in military operations over the past 2 days. A witness says the Saudi-led coalition bombed 2 bridges in the province, killing 2 brothers in a taxi. Yemen has been torn apart by nearly 3 years of conflict, which pits the government against the Iran-aligned Houthi rebels in northern Yemen.
Meanwhile, an American citizen held by Yemen's Houthi rebel group for 4 months has now been released. 63-year-old Danny Levon Birch, who works for a Yemeni oil company and is married to a Yemeni citizen, was detained in Sana'a after taking his children to school.
Immediately after his release, he was flown to Oman. Armed groups have abducted foreigners in Yemen for ransoms or because they suspected spying.
Yep.
And still to come here on Crossroads, Turkey's president is warning he may expand the military operations against U.S.-backed Kurdish forces.
Plus, Sweden. Sweden is battling a surge in crime, and ahead, that country's prime minister is proposing a dramatic change to try and help put an end to the bloodshed in Sweden. That story and more ahead on Crossroads. Turkish President Erdogan is vowing to expand the operation against Kurdish forces in northern Syria, Kurdish forces that are backed by the United States. The dangerous new escalation could lead to more casualties and might distract Kurdish troops from their ongoing fight against Islamic State.
I-24 News senior defense correspondent Chai Ben-Ari reports.
The crisis in Afrin, Syria rages on. A Turkish military operation to drive Kurdish forces out of the area has already resulted in over 300 deaths. The Turks describe the Kurdish-controlled areas near their border as a terrorist threat to their national security. But the Kurds have also been a key Western ally in battling the Islamic State, doing much of the fighting on the ground. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has been visiting his forces near the Syrian border and had this to say on Friday.
We will continue Operation Olive Branch, which is on its 7th day today, until we reach all our targets. After this, we will cleanse Manbij of terrorists as had been promised to us.
Manbij is a town 60 miles to the east of Afrin. There is a large Kurdish presence there, but these allied U.S. forces are also stationed in the area. Erdogan has personally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to withdraw them to a different location. So far, it appears no decision has been taken.
Either they'll stay or they'll go. Don't know what the answer will be. I would tell you that wherever U.S. troops are, they're going to be able to defend themselves. And we coordinate very closely with the Turks on that. They know where our forces are. There's no mystery about where they're going to be.
The U.S. has urged Turkey to de-escalate the situation and avoid actions that could risk direct conflict between the two countries. But at the moment, it seems the Turks aren't backing down.
We will continue our fight until there are no terrorists left, all the way to the border with Iraq.
Meanwhile, the Kurds are hedging their bets. They've already asked for assistance from the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the same government they are seeking autonomy from. Another bizarre twist in the history of this war-torn country. Chai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
For more on that, let's bring in senior diplomatic correspondent Nina Larson. Nina, so despite international calls for de-escalation, not only that Turkey is not letting up on the operation, it also has plans to expand it.
That's correct, Hal, and this is a worrying new development in this already very volatile situation. President Erdogan gave a rousing speech in Ankara earlier today saying that he's going to extend this operation potentially right to the Iraqi border. It seems that Turkey is very ambitious in this. They want to flush out the area of the Kurdish militia. And as that report said by our colleague, there's a bizarre twist now that the Kurdish fighters in that region have actually appealed to the Syrian government army for reinforcements. So that's another front in this war and an added complication.
Nina, another key figure in the Syrian civil war, the Syrian Free Army. What is their status in all of this?
Well, they really don't have any choice but to stand with the Turks, David. The Turks are their only real remaining ally and patron. They're still arming them. They're reinforcing them. So again, you have this bizarre situation where you have the Kurds standing with the Turks and asking for assistance for Assad. And we have to remember that Russia is Assad's ally. So the mixture in Syria now is just ever more complex, ever more confusing, and it's really clear that the Syrian people don't have any control over this conflict at all at this point.
And Nina, while this all is taking place on the ground there in Syria, another round of UN peace talks today, usually in Geneva, but this time around in Vienna. Is there any progress there?
Well, the only progress, Tal, is that they're still at that negotiating table. The main opposition group was there. The Syrian regime's representatives were there. No direct talks yet, but at least they were talking. The one thing that has come out of this today, and this is an interesting development if it actually plays out on the ground for real, is that the Russians have broken, reportedly, a ceasefire in eastern Ghouta, and that is that enclave that's been besieged by the Syrians and the Russians for months now. There's 400,000 civilians there, and it's just outside Damascus, and people are living in terrible conditions. There are conflicting reports, however, coming out of the talks. They're saying that this ceasefire has been brokered, but opposition figures are saying that the discussions are ongoing, and it's a bit early to tell quite yet whether it's been implemented on the ground. It was meant to go into effect midnight local time.
Nina Larson, our senior diplomatic correspondent, and the sirens go off just in time at the United Nations. Nina, thank you. We appreciate it.
Throwing it right to the next story. A horrible scene in South Korea as the fire rips through a hospital, killing 37 people and injuring more than 100 others. It's South Korea's deadliest fire in almost a decade, reviving concern over safety standards. Current law did not require a sprinkler system in the hospital building. Many patients walked through fire and smoke to escape. Others had to use slides. The city's mayor delivering his condolences to the victims and their families at the news conference.
I deeply apologize for the fire tragedy which occurred at Sejong Hospital in Miryang. I would like to express my deep condolences to the victims and their families.
Investigators are still combing through the building looking for clues.
Up next on Crossroads, President Trump is promising to protect more so-called dreamers, but it comes with a price. How are Republicans and his base reacting? Ahead, we'll talk to one conservative student with her perspective on immigration reform.
And there's fallout for the USA gymnastics team, but headlines first from Tel Aviv. Welcome back to Crossroads. The showdown over the government shutdown in the United States a week ago put the issue of protecting the dreamers back in the public spotlight.
The White House now has a framework for immigration reform that includes a path for citizenship for undocumented immigrants as long as they meet certain criteria and as long as there's funding for a border wall. To discuss, let's bring in Cassie Dillon. She's a college student and the founder of The Lone Conservative. It's a platform for students by students to share their thoughts on politics, current events, and conservative campus culture. Cassie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What is your feeling on how protecting the dreamers has become such a political issue?
It's absolutely a political issue right now. Right now, you're seeing the Democrats coming out against a policy that is very generous. It's more generous than Barack Obama's policy. Trump is absolutely giving the Democrats what they want, and they're not going to concede it and act like they want it anyways because they're so against Trump more than they are his policies. So that's why you're seeing him making a very fair deal and being rejected and labeled as a racist by everyone on the Democratic side.
Cassie, is it fair for the U.S. taxpayers to shell out $25 billion just to start building a border wall with Mexico?
Absolutely. I think it's really necessary that we do so because it was one of Trump's foundational purposes or foundation of his campaign. And if he does not build the border wall, then we're really going to see some problems during the midterms and during the next election. So I think it's absolutely necessary. The American people have voted for this. And I mean, he said that somehow he's going to figure out a way to have Mexico pay for it. So if he does that with tariffs or a different way, I guess we'll see what happens.
Cassie, wondering if you have any classmates or dreamers, what are their concerns about? How do you talk to them? How do you discuss the topic with them, if you can share it with us?
Yeah, we absolutely have some dreamers here at my school, and many of them are really concerned because right now their status is just up in the air. And I think right now Trump is really putting out a policy there that's going to protect people who didn't have a choice to come here. These people came here as children, and now they're just trying to get degrees and get employment. So I think he's making a very fair deal, and there are criticisms that are legitimate of what he's doing, especially because it might lead to even more illegal immigration and letting their parents say who did come here illegally as an adult. So I think there's a lot of good criticism of it. But I think it's a very fair deal. And if we're going to get the border wall, which I think is absolutely necessary to make up for his campaign promises and because the American people voted for it, I think this is a fair deal and this is what's going to have to happen.
Cassie, would it have been more fair, though, for the Dreamers, including your colleagues there in Massachusetts, if instead of getting rid of the DACA program, as President Trump did in September, if he simply said, okay, here's how we're going to change the DACA program?
Well, I think he is changing the DACA program. He's actually making this immigration deal open up to even more people.
Well,
it's going to be people.
To be clear, he might be doing it now, but for the last, since September, for the last 4 months, the DACA program has been gone, and a lot of the Dreamers have felt like starting in March, they were then subject to deportation. So as you said, they have been in some sort of limbo.
Yeah, absolutely. They have been in limbo. But I think what Trump has been doing is having a rhetoric where he's trying to make his art of the deal. He's really trying to get out there and tell the Democrats, well, if you don't give us what we want, we're not going to give you what you want. So I think what he's doing right now is he's trying to create a deal. And I don't think it's realistic that he would deport 1 million people for them being here and brought here as kids with no other choice. So I think what's going to happen is Trump is going to expand this. The Democrats are going to reject it regardless of how many people it keeps in America because they're out to get Trump. Now, it is absolutely fair to say that these people are still up in limbo and don't really know what's going to happen. However, there is a plan on the table, and it's time for the Democrats to show up.
I'm not so sure that your contention that the Democrats are simply out to get Trump is going to be the final say. But nonetheless, Cassie Dillon. Cassie, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It is great, even you agree or disagree with Cassie Dillon, it is so great to see students so passionately involved.
Very passionate. And I think that you can either agree or disagree with President Trump on the issue. He seems to have a very clear definition of who should be legal and who shouldn't be legal in this country right now. And the Democrats have to put forward their definition and make it clear to everyone.
Yep.
Well, going forward. There is even more fallout from the Larry Nassar sexual abuse scandal that has rocked USA Gymnastics.
Just days after the former Michigan State, University, and Olympic team doctor's sentencing, USA Gymnastics has announced their entire board of directors will resign. The scandal has also claimed a second prominent official at Michigan State University in East Lansing. Elizabeth Herr reports.
First and foremost, we apologize to the victims of Larry Nassar.
The Michigan State Board of Trustees apologizing.
In my heart of hearts, I really do not believe anybody here thought that Larry Nassar was the monster that he is.
And admitting that change is overdue.
This is about changing the culture at Michigan State University that allowed a predator to exist among us.
MSU responding to complaints it had not done enough to stop former school and Olympic team doctor Larry Nassar from sexually abusing gymnasts at its training facility, prompting the school president to resign on Wednesday and the school athletic director to retire on Friday. The same week, Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison. Olympic medalist Ali Raisman on The View.
But my work and the army of survivors, we're not done yet. We still have to hold these organizations accountable.
Authorities confirming to ABC News there is an active investigation of the famed Caroli Ranch run by husband and wife training team of Bella and Marta Caroli. At this time, the Carolis have not been charged with any crime and have not been accused of knowing about the abuse.
That was Elizabeth Herr reporting. And still to come here on Crossroads, a dramatic surge in gun violence in Sweden. What the Prime Minister wants to do about it to make the streets safer.
And remembering the Holocaust in pictures, the work of two photographers who survived. It is now the focus of a new exhibit. You're watching Crossroads on I-24 News.
Sweden, one of the richest countries in the world and ranked as one of the happiest nations in the world, as well as trying to combat a dramatic surge in gun violence.
The situation is so bad that Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven says that he will do whatever it takes, including sending the army into the streets to end the bloodshed. All right, 24 News correspondent Marcus White has the story.
January 17th, 2018. Police stand guard with weapons drawn after a suspected grenade attack at a police station in Malmö, Sweden's third largest city. One man was killed. A week earlier in the Stockholm metro area, one person died after picking up what sources say was a hand grenade outside of a transit station. Investigators don't believe the incident was terror-related. The violence is so concerning. Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven wants members of the military deployed on urban streets to try and end the bloodshed. Swedes say it's not out of the ordinary to hear about grenade attacks, turf wars, and revenge killings.
This kind of things is a surprise because we don't have it anymore.
normally.
The Times of London cites statistics showing more than 320 shootings in Sweden in 2017, many of them in larger cities, 110 murders. Sweden has a population of nearly 10 million people, also more than 7,200 rapes, an increase of 10% compared to 2016, and police haven't been immediately investigating rapes because they're focused on gang violence.
I had some accidents in the 90s and in the beginning of this millennia. But it was really bad gangs that was around here.
In the streets of Malmö, there are reports of delinquent children as young as 14 wandering the streets with assault rifles that look just like this and bulletproof vests. Some say much of the crime happens in areas known as immigrant-dominated ghettos. But others argue immigrants are not responsible for the surge in violence. They say crime happens in poor areas where many immigrants live. Jenik Radin is an adjunct professor of international relations at Columbia University in New York.
Unfortunately, there has been an increase in anti-Muslim sentiment. Everything from, whether it's from Iraq, Syria, Somalia, in that sense they classify them as Muslim.
Radin believes better integrating immigrants into society could help reduce crime.
If you tell me you don't like me because I'm Muslim or I look different, then I'm going to react, unfortunately.
Hoping to cut down on the violence, Sweden's government pledged an extra $880 million through 2020 to step up policing. They also strengthened gun laws.
Do you think putting members of the military out on the streets is a solution?
No. Absolutely not. Crime should be done by police because police, by definition, frequently try to integrate themselves with the community, get to know the community. Military are always going to be a little bit more hard-nosed.
But whatever the solution, there's hope in Sweden that this troubling crime trend will turn around.
Terrific story by Marcus White, who joins us now in studio. And Marcus, you mentioned anti-Muslim sentiment as a reason for the crime. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So there are reports that 15% of the population in Sweden, they are immigrants. And there's just a huge amount of anti-Muslim sentiment. Even just looking on the internet at things that people have written from Sweden, it's just mind-boggling. In fact, people have reported false crime statistics saying that Muslims are reportedly responsible for certain crimes when the Swedish government refuses to put out information related to the nationalities of people who do commit crimes.
Sometimes refraining from, bringing these data and making this information public gets the reverse action, I think. I wanted to ask you, where's most of the crime happening?
So most of the crime is happening in the bigger cities, Stockholm and Malmö, but there are people that live in the countryside in very nice areas that are very concerned, and they're worried because the police, of course, their first response is to go to these gang violence incidents. So if you live in the countryside and something happens, you're extremely nervous because you're fearful about how long the police will take to get there because their first priority is the gang shooting.
And there's a particular concern about among women about rapes?
The number of rapes in Sweden just staggering. One of the highest nations in Europe for rape. Women really in Europe have galvanized. The Me Too movement has taken off in Sweden, and women held a march lately. 36% of women in Sweden say that they are uncomfortable walking around at night, and that is just mind-boggling. In a country that you think of that has great unemployment and wealth, where people have these issues, and in fact the situation is so bad, people who come from other countries are being warned about walking around at night when they go to Sweden.
And one more thing, a few grenade attacks that you mentioned there in your report. Where do people get grenades from in Sweden?
So some of the grenades were left over from the Civil War era. The problem is simply just so bad that authorities are thinking about stepping up penalties for individuals who are responsible for grenade attacks. In fact, one of these grenade attacks happened to kill a young child recently, and the number of grenade attacks in Sweden marked between about 50 and 100 per year. Just really staggering.
That's crazy, something that I would never imagined happening in Sweden.
Right.
You know, Marcus White, thank you so much for this very interesting report. A new exhibit is opening in Jerusalem. It's called Flashes of Memory. It's a view of the Holocaust in pictures through the lens of Jewish photographers who were also victims.
It's a unique and powerful presentation. Our I-24 News correspondent Maya Margit has the story.
Photography, film, and history. How does a picture form our understanding of history? How do images shape collective memory? An exhibition is hoping to answer those questions by asking viewers to see beyond the picture to the person holding the camera. Ahead of International Holocaust Day, Israel's National Holocaust Memorial, the Yad Vashem Museum, has launched a new exhibition called Flashes of Memory. What's interesting here is that, first of all, there are thousands of pictures, thousands of photographs, but it also features many different perspectives from the Second World War. On one side, snapshots by German soldiers, used for propaganda purposes or other personal reasons. On the other, photos Jews shot in secret in the ghettos as they were officially forbidden to own a camera. So these pictures were an act of defiance.
What we want to do in this unique exhibition is to go backward and to look through the eye of the photographer and the mind of the editor that dealt with those photographs.
The final section of the exhibit looks at pictures and films shot by the Allied forces following the liberation of the Nazi death camps. Tomi Shacham, who survived Auschwitz, was separated from his parents during the war and is featured in one of them. He was just 10.5 years old when the Soviet army liberated the camp. Shacham remembers when the Russians photographed him along with other survivors in Auschwitz. He also recalls how hard it was to reunite with loved ones afterwards.
I went to Budapest after the war. I found out what street my relatives were on, knocked on the door, and saw my uncle. It was a very happy moment. He told me my brother died in a ghetto. I had no news of my mother. After a month or so living there, it was July 1st, my birthday. I was turning 11. I was playing in the garden when I heard someone call me to come inside the house. I was sure there was a surprise birthday party waiting for me. I went upstairs, and who do I see? My mother. Even today, I'm moved when I think about it. My mother remembered it was my birthday and came.
The exhibition underlines the important connection between visual documentation and how we view the Holocaust.
The camera has a great manipulative power. The photographs pretends to reflect reality as it is. In fact, it is a kind of interpretation of it.
The message? Photography and film may be powerful, but ultimately, no image is innocent. Reporting from Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, Maya Margit, I-24 News.
Wow. Marcus.
Powerful piece. Yeah.
So powerful. Coming up, we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about some people in France who are going nuts over Nutella. That's right. They're going crazy because it's on sale. And they're fighting with each other for it.
It's Australia Day, the national holiday marking the arrival of the first fleet of the British ships to New South Wales in 1788.
But not everybody is celebrating. There were mass protests across the country on this day demanding that the holiday be changed. History paints a grim picture of how those first colonists treated the indigenous Aborigines. They refer to it as Invasion Day. Invasion also because 700 of like the 1,000 that came over, they were criminals. I mean, this was an effort by England to, they had more prisoners than prisons, and so they put them on these ships and said, go to this place called New South Wales. We'll try to make a penal colony out of it.
To me, just interesting the fact that there's another country in the world like Israel where its national day is seen as the huge disaster to a different kind of, different sort of population.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, I love this last story.
Okay, go ahead.
France in chaos, fights, brawls, and riots in the streets.
No, it wasn't anything political. It was over Nutella. Yes, yes. People were fighting over Nutella after a supermarket chain slashed the price from about $6 a jar to just $1.75.
The jars were literally flying off the shelves. Police were called in to try to keep the peace.
You know,
everybody likes a sale. Everybody.
At $1.75, first it makes sense. You know, it's really cheap.
Right.
But would you fight over Nutella like this?
No. I mean, do you like Nutella?
To be honest, no. I don't like.
I mean, I think it's okay.
I don't like chocolate.
But like, if somebody could say, here, it's 50 cents, I still wouldn't like try to punch somebody in the face to get it.
What would you fight over? Let's say one
Snickers
product.
Bars,
Really?
Milky Way, and I love fruit, so mangoes. Mangoes were on sale. I'd get as many as I could.
It does look like Black Friday. Shoes. What are you asking?
And tall wins the day.
Exactly. And that just about does it for this hour of Crossroads.
Stay with us at 924 News for much more. Tall's anchoring Clear Cut right after this.